Well, as I said, I got pushed out the nest. I got pushed out.
I was like, this is what you about to do.
No, you will not be the last woman on earth with the Jerry curl.
It wasn't a Jerry curl, though.
You gotta.
It was just a curly fro.
Yeah.
Sticky notes on the fly.
You're listening to
Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. Way below acceptable. Way below acceptable.
On this week's episode,
I am not the folks that was in my parents' relationships. I'm just a product of it. Why had I allowed what I perceive as being shameful for them to be internalized as I am ashamed?
Way below acceptable.
Hey, Sticky Note Conversation listeners. This is your host, Erika Washington. And I had the pleasure to sit down and have one of the most cathartic conversations I've ever had with Dr. Tiffany Tyler-Garner, who is a professional in workforce development and a staunch community advocate. She's written her first book, The Journey Inward, 4 Seasons of Reflection. It's a book meant to be a year-long journey of healing and self-reflection. The conversation was so good, it actually continued for hours after we hit stop on the recorder. So I truly hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. And thanks for listening. My friend wrote a book. That's so exciting. So I want to start by first saying thank you for coming to hang out and in this little hotel room as we're doing these conversations, because I've been doing Sticky Notes for a while as an audio podcast, but trying to do some video and all of that in just different places that I am. So this is a start. I mean, we're in Vegas, but, starting with Vegas and, me doing certain things, certain conferences, that sort of thing. And so then we're hoping to be able to go on the road with it. So other conferences that I go to, that I meet people at, that we can, have some in-depth conversations about the work that they're doing and the life that they lead and all of that. But really want to start here in Vegas because, this is home and always will be a home for me. And also thinking about the people that I've gotten to know over the course of the almost 17 years that I've been in Vegas. And wow, you are one of those people. And I can't even remember when we met. And I saw, because I was trying to remember as I was thinking about some stuff we're going to talk about. And I was like, we're just going to talk about whatever. But I really was trying to remember when we met. And I cannot recall. But the earliest memory I have of you, I think would have been maybe at Nevada Partners. Maybe it was one of the gathering lunches or what have you.
At the bistro.
Yep. And I always call it the Black People Meeting, the Friday Black People Meeting. So back when Sam Smith was still around, yes. and then Rodney took over doing all of the conversations. And I feel like I learned a lot because that table was full of all kind of folks. Elders and young folks and folks who've been, doing stuff in Vegas for a long time, like yourself, and then other folks who were newer, like me. And we would just have some really interesting conversations.
I'll tell you, I do remember our first time. It was at a gathering, over a gathering, a great discussion over a meal. And I distinctly remember experiencing you as graceful, polished, very articulate, but with an uncommon resilience. You were there parenting your daughters. You were doing journalism, and you were just making it work. So the fact that you are heading Make It Work now, and that you not only through your advocacy center the experiences of women that look like me, but you were walking it out even before you took the helm of that organization, is something that for me gives me a pride about knowing you. Oh. And so I was honored that you would ask me to come here to share today, especially after sharing that level of vulnerability in the book. But as I think about who you've been in this community, in your journey, and to see your daughters down and them really be okay in their skin in ways that it takes decades for women to be okay and aware of their gifts and strengths and the ways in which they can impact the world.
So every time you talk, I always feel sort of bashful. I feel like because you speak from the heart, and I know you mean what you say, but you don't hear it very often, or at least that hasn't been my experience. And it hasn't been my experience. It wasn't the experience that I had growing up, right? And so, but it is something that I wanted to give my children. And so you saying, you know, I was making it work for make it work, and I was, because I think probably when we met, I didn't have a car. And I was trying to still get around and tell stories and write stories about whatever was going on in the community. And I just had to figure it out. And it was hard because Vegas is not a place to not have a car.
Yes.
It is not a pedestrian-friendly town. It is not a public transportation-friendly town. But, you know, it was just figuring it out. And figuring it out was also just meeting so many, like, really important people. And important meaning that they were just all trying to do something good. And I feel very lucky that I was able to meet so many do-gooders, you know, because you can move to a place and end up in the wrong part and end up only around folks who are doing the opposite of that and all just dealing with all this internal trauma and then exploding it out on everybody else. Like, that's completely possible. But to move to a place sight unseen, and then to...
Was it sight unseen?
It was sight unseen.
Wow.
Like, we came once to find the place, and we found a house, and then we came back and moved. Like, that was it. I didn't know anything about Vegas. I thought Vegas was a place that old people went to vacation, because my grandparents' friends, you know, they went to Vegas in the 80s to do whatever old people did, you know.
Okay.
They brought back an ashtray. That's what I knew about Vegas. There was an ashtray in my grandparents' living room, and nobody smoked, but here's the ashtray, right? And so, you know, I didn't have friends who went to Vegas and, you know, did that sort of partying. So for me, it was a place for old people to party. And I came here and I was like, well, it's bright and shiny and sunny, so it should be all right.
You made a life here.
I did.
And then you pivoted from that to helping others have a life, which is the one thing that I most respect about you. Even as I think about some of those early memories, I remember you living in this bungalow downtown.
A little greenhouse.
Yeah,
we named it Sala Salou.
Okay.
I named the house Sala Salou.
I remember that, and I remember your girls peering from the door as you came home, and I just thought the lessons that they are getting about womanhood and resilience are the things that you could easily teach. It's the thing that you got to live that people are going to be able to apply it, and you were doing that. And if there was a commercial for Never Let Them See You Sweat, girl, that has been and is you. And so you make it seem seamless, but as another woman that has walked some of those same paths, I know it isn't, and that it comes with a weight.
A heavy weight.
A very heavy weight.
So is that why you decided to write a book? Because of the weights that you've carried? Or
Yes.
where did the idea come from that you were going to write a book? And I want to say, as we're doing this, because this is a podcast, and we do want to make sure we have a commercial here, that folks, you can buy The Journey Inward, 4 seasons of reflections for deep healing and transformation by the one and only Dr. Tiffany Tyler-Garner, PhD. Right there. You can buy the book. So, but when did you decide that you wanted to write a book?
I didn't decide to write a book. What I really decided at the top of last year was that I was tired. I was tired of carrying around the weight of so many things for decades and trying things and never really feeling better about what was happening to me or around me. And so at the beginning of last year, I had the gift of going to this group that a woman in our community held called a Women's Processing and Purpose Group, where she opened up with this exercise and asked everyone to define what is it to process? What is processing? And there were 2 definitions that really stood out for me. someone noted that when something is processed, it's changed or transformed. And that also to process is to really get to resolution. And I thought to myself, I have spent most of my life carrying around stuff that hasn't changed and that I haven't gotten any resolve about. I will not spend another year making commitments to myself like New Year's resolution
And we
not
don't
keeping my and so that this year was going to be about really getting to a place where I at least understood why I was able to keep my word and never say no to anyone else, but wasn't keeping my word to myself. And over the course of this past year, really began unpacking things and discovered that there were things that I was carrying around that had nothing to do with me. Also, including a duty to feel like I had to respond to every challenge or problem presented or observed.
I feel like that's something that, if that's a woman's affliction or a Black woman's affliction, and I mean, I can only say as a Black woman that I had that affliction, and I know other Black women who have that same affliction. Like, what is that we feel like we can't say no? Like, why? And because I wonder sometimes when you talk about like what I've done for my children and how I've been able to show up for them, in a lot of good ways. But I also know that I've probably showed them generational trauma, and I know I've shown them, things that I see in myself that, I have to stop myself like, oh, my grandma used to do that. Really, that's not something I really need to pass on. But sometimes it feels like, because we do it automatically without even thinking about it. It's like breathing. But so we have to be so intentional about it. And that's hard. But why do you think that we
I think
do these things to
I think
ourselves?
there are a few things at play. One, I am mindful of the ways that we are still midwifing and nursewifing, literally nurturing other people's children, nurturing other people's vision or projects, and often with very little return. And that was foundational to our initial journey here in this country. So I'm not surprised that literally centuries later, there we are showing up with free labor, in labor, and laboring. And oftentimes in ways that leave us last on the list or never hitting it. And as I think about even some of the narratives we have around being a strong Black woman, or, hey, we know that this country has been saved on the backs of women or as a result of their advocacy, the ways in which our identity is reinforced for burning out ourselves. It's hard to escape it. And in some instances, when we do advocate for ourselves, we're told all these ugly things like, well, if you don't agree with that, you angry.
Yeah.
You are
Angry
black
Black
woman. And if you cry about that you being weak, you need to put your big girl's panties on. And if you essentially not pretending, if you are have the audacity to say enough is enough, that there must be something wrong with you, or maybe you are not suited in some way if you try to bring anything more than diplomacy to this relationship that is off balance and has been for centuries.
The magical Negro.
Yeah. And so we went from literally being bred to meet everyone else's needs to still being bred in some way to center everyone else's needs over our own. And whether it's the ways in which we subscribe to there's got to be a big mama and it should be you, or if you are not here to meet my pleasures or needs, then you are doing too much. All these subtle ways in which we literally allow ourselves to be trained to be and do what everyone else needs and never supported to find ourselves, to identify what we need, and then to protect or defend that. I can't see much difference between that and the ways in which we are called to every fight.
Yeah.
even if at the end of it there are no spoils for us, that the only thing that is spoiled are our relationships in our homes or with our children, because we've been out fighting for everybody else all day. And we come home to children who say, but why don't you see I need you to fight for me?
Yeah.
Or why don't you see that I need you to fight for you so that I'll know
Yeah.
how to fight for me? I think it's those things that perpetuate that. And I absolutely believe there are places that we need to own. So part of this work over the last year was about owning that. For me, like I do get to say no. So I need to figure out, why am I not saying no? And what is greater than my ability to do that for myself? How is it being reinforced, or how is it serving me to appear to be martyr-like in these ways?
So, did you practice saying no over the years, over this past year? And like, what was that? What did that feel like when you said no?
There is a discomfort, and there are places where it's been easier to say it, and places where I still struggle. And so I know the challenges the men in my life face, whether it's my sons in that walk or my spouse each day. And it's hard to say I am tired when I know they've been out in the world being spanked all day and just need a lap or a shoulder.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I really need a bath first before I can.
Right.
And so those places are a little harder to say no. I think there's some places where we are beginning to receive those messages that make it a little easier to say no. So when folks say it after this election, I'm sitting it out. I'm like, oh, we it's time for us to sit down. And then there are the things that you see that you're like, I can't sit this one out. My silence means it's okay. And there is really nothing okay with this. And so the short answer is, I have been practicing it all year, and I still need practice. There are fights that I will see, whether it's other people's oppression, or the young man in Georgia who was literally ran down and murdered.
Yeah.
As tired as I was like, I don't know how I can see him and not see the two young men I have raised and say they should be able to jog. God help me.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about having sons. What was that like as a younger mother, trying to, because it always seems to me that you seem to know how to balance your thoughts and feelings. Like, that's the Tiffany that I've met. But, in the book, of the parts because it is a year-long journal that, there's an active practice there. But going through the pages, you kind of talk about what it was like when they were younger, and that it was a lot of difficulty. How did you navigate raising boys, when you were still trying to figure out who you were?
Oh my goodness. I would say over the course of this year, some of the most painful lessons and opportunities have surfaced. And so I grew up during a time where we were told not only to be the strong Black woman, but you literally didn't need a man. And that you would be okay and your kids would be okay if you were raising them alone. And I now realize not only do we need each other, like need all of us in this work, that literally my sons were growing up in conditions where, as their identity was forming, there were these subtle messages about there is no need for them. And how part of the work needs to be accepting that I can't and shouldn't be doing it alone, and in ways that allow them to see their space and place in the world. I will tell you that over the course of this past year, my eldest son, for the first time since my divorce, relocated to California where his father lives and was living with his father. And within 30 days, both of them called me to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much we are alike. We are finishing each other's sentences. And I can't believe the ways in which we see the world similarly. And I thought, I have spent nearly 3 decades trying to parent out of him just who he was in terms of his personality.
Because it was in his DNA,
It
because
was
that's his
in-
daddy's child.
Yeah. And that's okay. Like literally, genetically, part of your identity or personality is aligned with his. And so the ways in which they are much less risk averse or have a natural entrepreneurial spirit is I think about all the times I was trying to get him to behave as opposed to empower him to be the entrepreneur he was. It reminded me of several instances where I got those calls as their mother and thought, can't you see I'm just trying to keep a roof over our head? Why is the school calling again today? And it would be for things like your son was selling your leftover chicken legs at school. And I'm thinking, do you know that was supposed to be dinner tonight?
Right.
What would possess you to take the leftovers out of this house and sell it? Or, hey, your son gathered $1 from every student and then had Domino's deliver pizza and then charged them each for $5 a slice. And I'm going, oh my gosh, in Los Angeles, in this time, are you already on track to maybe be selling some things later?
Yeah.
That's going to take you.
So you went a different route in your head, not a route of he's an entrepreneur that was getting seeded angel funding so that he could then, resell at a profit. Your mind went more negative just because of like the stresses around and that sort of thing.
And now I can go, oh my gosh, his father came here on an education visa, actually has an MBA, 2 other degrees. And when I met his father, he had a taxi cab franchise. So he has been in business for himself for over 60 years now. The fact that our son has been flirting with business since 2nd grade is not, oh my gosh, I need to keep him out of jail. He'll be selling something else in a decade from now. But rather, how might I have been able to give them something else, like a clear sense that they are okay and that I don't have to manage some of the stereotypes that were out there about where they might end up.
Why do you think your mind went that direction?
Oh my goodness. I grew up doing Boys in the Hood, Baby Boy, during that time in Los Angeles, in the wake of the Rodney King riot, like literally when the riots happened. I had to have been about 8 months pregnant with my son. And so at the time that I grew up, there were these very strong, dominant images about what it was to be a male of African-American descent in that community. Even though they ran counter to who their father's narrative. He was actually from Nigeria. I remember being 6 months pregnant with our oldest son, driving down Crenshaw with him. They were attempting to pull him over. He literally gets out of the car like, why are you harassing me? They say, get down on the ground, and he scoffs and says, get down on the ground in all my white. He had on this white traditional African garb, and I am literally about to pass out. I'm like, you are going to have both of us murdered.
Right.
But you could not tell his father that he wasn't not only capable, but more than capable and even superior. So even the complexity of they're not going to stop and ask you if you are Nigerian or African American.
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah. The time that I grew up in was one where there was a particular narrative being pushed in the community. And so, of course, wanting more for them and worrying about the possibilities, like literally growing up in a community where you were seeing young men victimized by gang violence and other things, couldn't help but worry.
Yeah.
And now I wish that I had the space to, and this is something we all face. I had the space and resources to concentrate on the top of the pyramid. So, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where they're like, if you are worried about food, shelter, and water, you never get to things like actualization, like who do I want to be?
Yeah.
How do I want to impact the world? What I want my legacy to be?
That's what keeps us in a poverty mindset, though. It feels to me like almost on purpose. I think about in that same vein, I've talked about it before on the podcast about my therapist reminding me of like any frustrations I talk about that I have with my children and maybe how they're moving and how they're, taking on certain challenges or creating challenges for themselves that frustrate me. And she's like, well, but they have room to do that. And I'm like, well, I guess, but this could happen. Right. But that's what she made me realize is that she's like, you've been in this fight or flight for so long. Like felt like you've not had choices. Like you had to do this. Like it's, kill or be killed sort of situation. Like you're always in that survival mode, and they're not always in survival mode. So they have room to experiment, to try, like, I want to do this or I want to do that, and not have a whole plan because they also have a safety net. I am still always a safety net to a certain degree, right, or where I can be. But they scare me with sometimes the things that they decide to do, but also they need that space so that they're not at the bottom of the pyramid and thinking that way. Because it's always the point, right, that our children are doing so much better than we are and that they're not having to repeat the things because otherwise we're never making progress if our offspring has to start where we started. But giving them that space also in a world that I don't recognize or know how to live in is completely scary. Yeah. And I don't know, I told her, I said, I had my children, natural, besides a C-section. And I was like, I think I want an epidural now. They're making me nervous. I like I have my epidural now because, it's hard because they're young adults. And you got to let them do the thing. And you're just kind of over here. You can't be like, don't do that. You need to sit in the house. I want you to come home and sit in the house.
Yes. I talk about that in the book. One of my reflections was realizing that there are some things that I got to choose, and there's some that I don't get to choose. Mm-hmm. Like I got to choose when I was going to be a parent, but I don't get to choose when they're going to make me a grandmother. Mm-hmm. Or I didn't get to choose and shouldn't be able to choose who they decide to marry or spend the rest of their life with.
I kind of want to make that choice.
I know. You do, right? And then there was
that arranged marriage thing. I watched the Indian Matchmaker. I'm like, this is not a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. At some point, though, I realized that I had been given the talk my whole life and was still giving it. Talking, and probably so loud that they could not even hear their own thoughts. That literally I had fostered a world where they probably spent most of their time in fear because I did. Yeah. And that at some point, shouldn't we have the freedom to do more than just fear living? And so that can be an interesting journey. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not only empowering them, but watching them get to practice. Like I remember during this last election cycle, specifically hearing Michelle Obama say, well, we don't get to fail for it. And I thought, I have been managing the worst case scenario most of our lives. And shouldn't they have the gift of some other scenarios? And how might my life change if I wasn't always managing snake eyes or the worst of the possibilities for them? And if I would have them fully realize who they are as the incredible men they are, will that happen if the only thing that I've taught them to manage is fear and not how to find their hopes or realize their dreams for themselves? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I guess you can't grow without making mistakes and learning from them.
That's the practice.
Yeah. But it's still scary to watch them do it. I mean, it's scary for ourselves too, but
yeah.
Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington.
Hi, my name is Aaron Ford.
Hi, my name is Nina Nova.
Hi, I'm Lori Lee.
And you're listening to
Sticky Note Conversations
with Erika Washington.
Hey y'all, I'm Erika Washington, the host, creator, and executive producer of Sticky Note Conversations. My life, my mind, is always running way too fast. So I jot down thoughts, questions about life, wish lists, goals, all on sticky notes. One sticky note was this podcast. Over the course of my journalism and social justice journey, I've met some really amazing people, but I hated that I couldn't talk longer and really dive into their lived experiences, their views of the world, and their dreams for the future. Sticky Note Conversation is for anyone who enjoys a really good conversation.
Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington.
So when you were writing the book, and well, let's go back to when you took this class and talking about, you know, all the steps you needed to do, what else was involved in I guess uncovering, you know, some of the things that you've been holding in or holding back?
So we did that workshop together, and I just made a commitment on that day that I was going to start really processing through any and everything that came up over the course of the next year instead of doing resolutions. Mm-hmm. And then there were some things that came up that I needed other people in my life to hear, but we had not gotten to a place in our communication or our relationship where they could hear it directly or we could talk about it one-on-one. Mm-hmm. But I felt like I needed to get it out of me and off of me. Mm-hmm. And so I began sharing or posting in hopes of like modeling something a little different. And as I did that, folks began reaching out to me to say, hey, where is that at? Or is that in a book? Or where are you reading from? And I'm like, I am not reading from anywhere. And folks were like, you should really consider writing a book. And then someone took the bold step of connecting me with a mother-daughter publishing team that specializes in empowerment. And so the short answer is, for me, that work was, I just decided I was going to, whatever came up, to get it out. And because it was coming up within a larger context of my journey, which included my family, friends, work, and a number of other things. And because I felt like I had an opportunity to say all the things that I had never made time to say to my son, so that if there was any wisdom they could glean from it, if it was put out somewhere and read, that they could pick that up. Because maybe there's some things that I still haven't had the courage to say, like, I realize that there are things that I try to choose for you that are really your choices.
Right,
because of the choices I made or some of those things. And so it was really a commitment to purging, releasing. And sometimes assigning things. Like one of the epiphanies that came out of it for me was that I had been making decisions about my relationships based on some relationships I was never in. So
what do you mean?
I'm not the grandmother who got left by my grandfather. But I absolutely, at different times in my journey, had all the fears of do men stay. Why would I have that? Why did I have that? Mm-hmm. I am not the folks that was in my parents' relationships. I'm just a product of it. Why did I have all the shame of what resulted in their relationship? Why had I allowed what I perceived as being shameful for them to be internalized as I am ashamed? I am shameful. And so
how did you answer that? How did you answer the fact that why you took it upon yourself to hold it?
In some instances, things get handed to us. Other instances, we don't have the awareness or development to realize not to pick it up. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the norms in family systems are such that they're like, this is what we do as a part of the system.
Yeah.
And so I would say any combination of things. I think the harder questions for me to have been the answer is, now that I know better, why am I still?
Yeah.
And so in those places where I'm like, and you still get stressed enough to go run the food. Why? When you know that it's stress, and that there are four other things you can do instead of stressing this way. Or you still let their feelings of inadequacy make you ask yourself if you good enough. You know that ain't about you. Why are you picking that up?
But that makes me think about how folks will say, oh, you've changed or what have you, which change is good. We're supposed to want to change. But a lot of times it does feel like you're put into a box of like, this is who you are, this is who you are, this is how I see you. So when you come out of that, it can happen where you feel like you lose friends or family members even. And so how do you navigate that as you're trying to figure out who you are? And then how do you know where that balance is? Because sometimes we lose folks because the season is over. I do know that. But other times it's like trying to know that you're self-aware enough that you're doing the right thing for yourself and that you're going in the right path. And so losing people is okay. And other times, people go off and people fall away because that person's a jerk, right? And so, I don't know, sometimes it's like, I feel like I'm self-aware, but I want to know that I am actually self-aware and that even when I'm thinking about myself and what's good for myself, that I'm not pushing people away. Does that make sense?
It does.
So like that journey feels like sometimes the journey has to be selfish, but then I think, sometimes folks take it too far and you don't know like what you're supposed to be doing.
And hear that. Because I'm going to say it's not sometimes, it's all the time the journey has to have self-centered in it, which is very different.
And very hard because we're taught to not be self-centered. Like that's a bad thing. You thinking about yourself. Oh, you only thinking about yourself when we should, because ourselves matter. But that is really ingrained, especially in me. Like it's really difficult to center me. Even
Which
when
is different than being self-centered.
True. Yeah, it is true. Because you're also taught like your mom, the kids come first, and a lot of times in certain ways they do. Like you want to make sure they eat and all of that, but we got to put our own oxygen mask on. Like I know all the things, but putting them into practice when there's these other people around who need you, that's hard.
I will tell you that some of the one of the powerful lessons coming out of this journey for me is that I absolutely get to change. I get to change my mind. I get to change my approach. I get to change my perspective, my priorities. I get to change my philosophy, my beliefs. And it is easier to do that change when I'm actually thinking about the why I do it, and it's easier to sustain it. But one of the critical lessons for me was embracing the fact that I do get to change my mind. I don't care how many other times I've said yes. Today the answer is no, and whether or not anyone else is okay with that. If I'm okay with it, and that I literally get to have all of my personhood. And if I am a mother that is modeling for my children that the only answer they get to have is yes to everything and everybody, then I've also missed the opportunity to help them have boundaries and some other things that I have absolutely cried about later by modeling for them that the only answer is to bend over backwards. And so there's of course I can say all these things in hindsight as a mother of a 32 and a 29-year-old. We're like, oh, make sure you do this.
It is different when they're 5.
Yeah,
it is different.
The other piece is being comfortable that you did what you knew to do the best you could at any given moment. So this notion of going back and beating myself up over and over again for using the only tools I had at the time, I'm like, I'm over that. I'm over Monday morning quarterbacking, especially 4 decades later.
Yeah.
After some of
because you'll hold on to things like the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, and all of that, and I think about something you said to me that it wasn't even really the words. It was the moment that you just sort of pulled me inside and you were just like, I see you and I see that you are okay. And, no matter what has happened to you, that you are okay. And I've seen it and I've been there, and we can hide behind it or we can feel ashamed about whatever has happened in our life, but everything is not about us. And it took me a long time to come to that conclusion that something somebody else does to you doesn't reflect on you so much, because that's how I held it.
Yeah.
Because I looked at myself as being smart and knowing how to prioritize and, being able to see people and see their full selves. And then it's like, oh, I missed something here. Like I missed a whole other side of somebody who then hurt me. And then I was like, well, what did I do wrong? And not so much in that sense, because, I'd heard people say that before, that they blame themselves. And I was like, oh, they made me do it or whatever. I didn't feel that. I felt like, but though that I welcomed it or made it seem like it was okay. And I couldn't figure that out. Like I couldn't figure it out. And so then I didn't know how to talk about it. And I didn't know what to do with that. And so not knowing what to do with both physical and mental and emotional injury to yourself by somebody who said that they cared, like I didn't know how to wrap my head around it. Mm-hmm. And so I certainly didn't know how to wrap my head around it and then have a conversation about it. So, with you, I didn't feel like I had to have a conversation because it was just what it was. And that was very helpful to me. And I want to say thank you for you for that moment, because it was a lot.
I so appreciate that, and thank you for sharing that. And as someone in that moment with you, I want to say to you, let me say it this way. Another thing that came out of this year journey for me was that I was going to stop owning the way that others abused me as a result of their choices and decisions. Mm. And that not only did I not need to own it, that I was going to stop apologizing for it and start walking around in shame for doing the things that I should have reasonably done. It's reasonable for me to believe and want to trust you.
Yeah.
It's reasonable for me to open myself up to you loving me and it being safe. It is reasonable for me to extend my trust and loyalty and to move forward in faith and to stand in this relationship with a confidence that says we are married and I am here. That you didn't have the capacity or the skill or whatever was showing up for you, your trauma, and then you made a choice that injured me. I'm no longer going to take responsibility for you showing up as you did. And I'm also not going to continue to be in prison or punishing myself for your inability to manage this gift you were giving in this relationship. And so from that perspective, there is nothing for me to apologize for. And I'm going to stop walking around like it's my fault. And I'm going to stop trying to have a reason or excuse for you doing what you did. I don't know why.
Right. It's not.
It's not my responsibility.
Right. To explain it.
Yeah.
To figure it out. I don't need to psychoanalyze you.
So you're right. I don't have anything to say to others about what you chose to do. And if there is someone that doesn't understand why I would protect myself or love me or had the courage to say, no, this is where the boundary is, or not, or I will not do this, then even there, it's not the relationship for me. Because someone who is at a place where they are really committed to me being okay and me being safe would need an explanation for why I said no to
Right.
that behavior, those choices, or a relationship where that's consistently happening.
Right.
And so, like, really getting clear about that. Like, I will no longer take responsibility for the person that sexually abused me and molested me. And I don't care what family member it was. I will no longer take ownership for that. I will no longer take ownership for the husband that didn't know not to hit me in anger or to call me out my name or to financially abuse me by deciding when he would be a provider based on how he was feeling about it. Especially as someone who shows up every day, even on the days when I don't feel like it. And so for me to even have to explain to someone, I decided to be in relationship with someone who I do share values with. That should be understandable. So
Right.
if I will go to work when I don't feel like it, or I will manage my diplomacy even when I feel like it, then I should be in relationship with someone that is like-minded, right? And so there shouldn't be an explanation needed for that. But I have absolutely spent, oh my goodness, I would say 11 years in my first marriage, wanting my kids to have a father so much because I was raised by my mother that I absolutely allowed myself to work around, make excuses for any number of things. And I'm now at a place where I can say it's okay that our capacity and needs were a mismatch.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that I needed, like the ability for us to disagree without being physically afraid,
Right.
it's okay. And so I can even release you to, but walk around in shame anymore for it or keep making myself somehow responsible for any part of it. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, because I don't know any or haven't heard of any abusers walking around in shame, in that way. It always feels like there is an excuse or a reason for, whatever physical or mental or emotional abuse that someone does to someone. And so they're never asked the question, well, why did you do it? It's always, why did you stay? Or why did you allow it? Or, why, why didn't you just, leave, or why'd you hit back, or whatever it was. That the question is always directed at the person that it's inflicted upon. And I'm not using the word victim on purpose, because I don't think of it as victim. Like, I guess it can be, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a bad word, but it's not that so much as like you end up being somebody's punching bag for whatever reason. But the question is always directed towards the punching bag, not the puncher. And I'm always curious as to why that seems to be how the community like responds, because I remember specifically thinking about whether or not I was going to have the conversation out loud. Like, I have this podcast, I have multiple podcasts, I have this platform in which I can have whole conversations. I advocate for folks around a lot of different issues, but this wasn't something I felt like I could have an in-depth conversation with anybody about. But at the same time, I sort of wanted to. So I had to think about like what was holding me back. Like, one, I'm a private person and I like my privacy. I think it's important. But also, I think I was afraid of the pushback, of comments, of people can be very negative and put that responsibility on you. And even if I, at that time, was not able to feel unashamed and all of that, but even if I wasn't feeling ashamed at that time, it still would have hurt for somebody to make a comment on social media or wherever and, put the blame on me. That would be very hurtful, because I've seen it happen. I said, Keke Palmer is an example. I feel like people were real mean. Oh, you shouldn't have wore that dress at the Usher concert or whatever. Like, that was an excuse for her partner's behavior, but they're always, I don't want to make a blanket statement and say always, but it feels like 90% of the time there's always there is this blaming of the woman more so than the man. And it keeps folks from being able to say out loud what's happening. And it kept me from saying something out loud. And it's not the way to healing, and it's also not the way to help other folks, as they are trying to navigate similar situations, because it's not uncommon.
It isn't. And I would say, unfortunately, on either end, I will just share this for perspective. Well, two things. One, it's the rare instance that someone is injured by a drunk driver, and we say, "Why were you out driving and let him hit you?"
Right. Yeah. Why do you let him hit you? Right. Mm-hmm.
And there are ways in which we could fully appreciate that in the throes of addiction, there's some other deep-rooted issues or things that may be happening if you're at a place where you're behind that wheel and then you injure someone.
Yep.
Even when those things are happening,
Mm-hmm.
I still shouldn't be in a position where I have to come up with a story for why the drunk driver hit me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for me, it's akin to something like that.
Yeah.
Where literally I have been injured as a result of whatever's going on with someone else, whether it's addiction, trauma, or whatever it is. And then there's this expectation that somehow I should have a story for why I was hit by the driver, or why the car was so damaged, or I need to somehow even be responsible for the insurance on both ends, or the repair of my car as a result of it, or some of these other things that we would never ask if that was an instance. Well, why were you going to the grocery store when he was on that street? You knew he was going to be on that street, didn't you?
Right.
No,
there's a possibility for drunk drivers to be out because alcohol exists, and alcoholics exist, and people who make bad decisions exist. So, it's your fault because you know that they're out there.
Yeah. And so just like that sounds ridiculous. Yeah. Similarly, when you have been injured in that way, this notion that somehow the person that has been injured should have a rationale for the accident, the issue, or whatever it is, would be just as troubling. I also want to say transparently that my grandparents had a very turbulent relationship, and I mean turbulent to the point where she almost dismembered him, like dismembered his finger. And there are these stories as a part of our family narrative of in her second or final marriage, her literally him coming home in the middle of the night after being out drinking and hanging out, infidelity, jumping from behind the kitchen door and stabbing him with an ice pick.
Ooh.
And so the narrative was our grandmother didn't put up with anything, and he was, men are out there and they don't honor you, they're out cheating. And my grandparents had 6 children together, and so each of his children lament his absence in their life. As a mother now of sons, I can say if my son was in a marriage where they've gotten to the point where she has stabbed him and nearly dismembered him, I don't know if I would be saying to either one of them, stay for the children.
Right.
And so there are even ways in which we talk about these things that don't support anyone to get the help or to do the work needed in those instances. And I will say that I have seen where there is, as people are trying to understand why these things happen, sometimes they're asking why to the wrong person.
Yeah.
And that is something that we have to manage, unfortunately. And you know what, let me back up and say, it's not something we have to manage, but there's a temptation to. And so that part of it, some of the healing or work is, I'm not going to manage that. I'm not going to manage to explain
Yeah.
why this
And
person chose
that's
what they
where
were
I am.
chosen.
I mean, I don't have a whole lot of conversation about it in the first place, but I did, I feel like, therapy and journaling and conversations, like all of that, is something that I did. But then there was this all of a sudden a point where I don't know, I had this aha moment that I was just like, oh, no, I actually, you know what? I don't have to think about this all the time. Like, I don't have to let it like loom over me in this way. Like, it always felt like it was this thing in the room. Like domestic violence is just sitting right over there, right? Because it's something I got to pass by. It's something that it's because, there's protection orders and there's, lawyers and there's all these things and you're still thinking about it because, you're unpacking stuff, right? And so, and I was always forward thinking about cameras in the house and, protection and all of that. But it came down to it. And I think another aha moment I had is that honestly, like, what he wanted was like to control me in a way where then he could have whatever this upper hand is that he wanted to have. And I feel like to a certain degree, it was still there because even though he wasn't there, even though marriage wasn't still there, nothing is there, it was still like there because it was still being thought about. And then I had to realize, like, I don't actually have to think about this at all anymore. I don't have to walk around afraid. I ain't afraid of you, because also I think, and once I got past the point of feeling bad about myself and feeling sorry for myself and, feeling stupid, and I realized, oh, but I'm not, because I am all those things. I am loving and I am nice and I do care and I do want people to have nice things and, realize that someone's a gold digger and they just want to have access to the things that you have. And I'm open and willing to give people access to certain things. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't that stupid. I might have been, a little, I don't even know what the word is, but I wasn't stupid because what's mine is mine. And I protected myself financially. I protected my children financially. Like, I'm also a Capricorn. So what you're not about to do, what you don't mess with is my money, right? Like, you're not going to make me I've been financially unstable. Like, I've been financially unstable because of what life was throwing at me and what I couldn't play catch up on. And so when I got to a point where I was in control and I was able to save and I was able to understand how credit worked and I was able to like have things and I was able to buy a house, ain't nobody gonna take it from me now. Like, I worked too hard for it. Like, this is mine. And when I'm ready to get rid of it, it's where I want it to go. Like, I control that narrative. So I had to realize that I also controlled that narrative about my emotions as well. But I think what sort of, what I'm afraid of now or have trepidation about now that I'm hoping that your book might help me with is not carrying that baggage into anything new when that time comes, because there's that space of being cautious because that's important. And I think it's also important to make sure you're not making the same mistake over again, because sometimes we pick the same people in different skin, and think we got something different, and we find out, we have this habit or this type and go towards that same sort of thing. So not wanting to do that, but not putting all of that on a new person that has nothing to do with the past, because we all have baggage, we all carry baggage, and it's hard to put it down. And some of it's there for actual good protection, but some of it will keep us from ever getting to that place of trust and happiness, because everybody's not a jerk. So I guess I'm wondering how you got to that place where you were able to put down the hurt and the maybe even over cautiousness you might have had to trust and believe in, the husband that you have now.
There are a couple of lessons that came out of this year around these specific considerations. One, the importance of going back to the loss and reclaiming a lesson for it, so you don't only see the loss or feel loss as a result of something that has happened. Two, making sure that you really work toward restoration, including your identity as a part of the process. And then beyond that, the ability to really, I want to say, let go and from this place. And it's only, when I tell you recently that some of this work has happened for me, I can tell you that in the summer of my sophomore year of high school, I experienced like a date rape situation. Like literally went on one date with a gentleman, like a lunch date. He called the next day and I wasn't home. I was out having my hair braided. He was like, I called there and you didn't answer the phone. If I had caught up with you, I would have snatched all your braids out and broke your nails. Clear flag for me, like what? We went to lunch and had a burger.
Right.
No intimacy. I'm just meeting you. This is a clear flag. That person stalked me for several months. And at the time, I was working at this fast food place after school from 5 to 10. And so I feared that he would either accost me on the bus stop or accost me at my job. So one evening, he was like, hey, I see you at home. And I'm like, no, I got to go to work. He's like, well, let me give you a ride. And so I'm literally panicked, like, oh my gosh, I made the mistake of taking my mother's gun out the home, thinking I'll just scare him if he tries to do something to me. Because at this point, I'm like, I either get beat up by him at this bus stop trying to get to work or something's going to happen. So we get to the parking lot of my then job. He literally goes to like restrain me. I pull it out, he grabs it and then forces me to copulate him and then rapes me. He was never, ever arrested. I literally, out of fear, began ditching school. Didn't want to tell my mother what had happened. Was afraid that he would literally kill me, because that later on that night he came back up to my job and was like, oh, I don't have your gun, but I'm going to give you a ride home. And my homeboy came along for us to give you a ride. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this person is, I'm going to end up dead on the side of the road somewhere. And I tell you how God works, and I'm a believer. That night, my aunt brings my cousin to work because he has missed his bus. This same aunt does not drive at night. Like literally, my other aunt was living with her. She went into labor, and my mother had to drive all the way across town to take that aunt to the hospital to deliver that baby. So this woman who doesn't drive at night, just so happens that my cousin and I work at the same place. They got me the job. Is dropping him off at work at the end of my shift and says, Tiff, I'll take you home. That's the only way I was able to escape. Years later, I returned to school after dropping out, graduate because I've had a son now. Someone encouraged me to continue going to school, ended up transferring to USC with a 3.89 GPA. Now 4 degrees later, even though I had 4 degrees, I still allowed my family to talk about me as the person who rebelled and dropped out of school. I still saw myself as a dropout and was making excuses for and trying to outlive. So 4 degrees later, still feeling like, but you dropped out, you aren't worthy. Not until maybe the fall of this past year while writing this journey did I finally say, I need you to know that I wasn't just ditching or someone irresponsible. I was afraid. You know, they never arrested Shannon. And every day I left the house, I went to a friend's house or my cousin's house because I was afraid. I'm not the buck up
Yeah.
that y'all laugh and say that I am. And this woman who's now Dr. Tiffany Tyler always had that capacity there. What she did not have was safety. And so finally, decades later, degrees later, I'm saying, I will no longer laugh about, adhere to, subscribe to this notion of how effed up a child I was.
Yeah.
And so this notion of going back to not only reclaim your identity as an independent woman who had the wherewithal to protect her and her children financially, but also saying, I'm not going to live like this victimization.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I know that I'm going to choose to love again. So now I'm doing the work to make sure that the other person doesn't have to live with, neither one of us has to live with this baggage that you tried to leave at my house.
Right.
That I won't do that. I will say it's part of the work. And so the fact that you're already thinking about it and you're not allowing his choices to give you a title that you don't want. And so for years, I allowed the other person to hand me the title of high school dropout,
Yeah.
despite the fact that I've always had the aptitude or capacity to learn at the level that I did. The fact that I allowed everyone to laugh and even carried the weight of feeling like I was the black sheep, because I knew I had within me to be within me to be scholastic. And just last year saying, after all that time, no, I'm not that person that we've laughed and tried to maybe be. I was a child in trauma and in a school system that didn't have the resources to see that and address it, in a family system that had had several generations of trauma, and so didn't have the capacity to help unpack it. But I decree and declare this day, not another day am I going to laugh about it with you or be ashamed of it or walk around it. That baggage, that title, that thing has no space here. That's not who I am.
At all. Did you after that happened, did you tell your mother? Did she know? Everybody?
Eventually, because I was in counseling, working through having been molested by my uncle. And I told the therapist, and the therapist called my mom, was like, you need to go pick up Tiffany from work. So I went back to work, continued working and everything else, and was like, she needs to have a conversation with you. Unfortunately, my mom had moved to California when I was 10 months old. Her and my aunt were roommates, and someone broke into their place at gunpoint and violated them. And so it literally brought up all that trauma, and in particular the piece of, I never wanted to see one of my children experience that, and I could not keep my daughter safe from my own brother, and now safe from whoever this stranger was. And so if you can imagine the compounding of that kind of trauma in a family system, and we're talking about, when I say one of the most resilient, dear souls that I know, someone who was taken in by her great-grandmother at the age of 72. That's who my mother was. And raised by her great-grandmother until her senior year, when her great-grandmother died at 89. So basically someone in something akin to kinship care.
Yeah.
2 years later, pregnant with her first child, me. And so as you think about even the compounding of those things, you get to a place, and this is something that happened over the course of this journey, where I am realizing a few things. One, my expectations needed to be adjusted. So like, what should I expect of this foster youth to be able to unpack or do if she's going through her own trauma? To that I'm not what other people chose to do.
It's so important when you think about our parents. I just had a conversation, and I think by the time people see this conversation, that conversation will have aired with my good friends like my brother, Derek, about his mother passing. And we were talking about what life is like as orphans and all of that now. And, you know, I did not have a close relationship with my mother. Like, we had a very segmented relationship for a lot of reasons. And she had a lot of trauma and a lot of pain that she carried that I never really understood because she didn't talk about it. But I know, you know, some of it, I know it was there. And I spent a lot of time being frustrated with her because, like, you're not a good mom. You don't love me, that sort of thing. And I realized that she wasn't maternal. And she wasn't meant to be a mother. Like, that wasn't really her calling. So she had very little tools to work with. And I think when it comes to being a child, you see your parent as your parent. You don't see them as a human being. You don't see them as a human being with their own journey and their own past life and everything, that their fears and all of that. There's this high expectation because they're supposed to know all the things. They're supposed to be able to do the things, whatever. And so I had that.
Standard of perfectionism.
It's so high. And I'm sure my children have some of the same thing for me because sometimes I think about it and I'm like, dang, y'all.
Like, you know, not only am I doing the best that I can, how great I must be really doing it. This is where I started.
Exactly. I'm like, you don't know where we could be, like, but they don't know anything about my life growing up in that way.
I'm not talking.
Right. I'm not talking.
I'm, for the first time,
and that's so, and it's so hard to, it's so hard. And that's part of it, I think, even making an excuse that's so hard to do for me to sit down and tell my children things that, you know, it's hard for me to open my mouth and say, but at the same time, I am asking for them to see me as a whole human being, but I'm not giving my whole self because also you think, oh, well, they're kids and, you know, they don't need to know this. But then that's repeating behavior, you know, of the past. But what made me think about you talking about your mother and her past traumas and how things must have affected her, and you're trying to tell her about what's affecting you, but then her not being able to be there the way you might need her to be there because she's got this. And so this generational thing, and sexual assault especially.
Yes.
You know, my mother was also sexually assaulted by a group of people. And I know this story because when she told me in a very angry way. Like, she didn't sit me down and tell me this happened. She said it in a way that I think probably the only way it could come out of her mouth. And it scared me, you know. And I think she was also partly trying to scare me because she was like, I don't want you to be out in the streets, going places and doing things. And she's telling me this thing had happened to her, but I didn't know what to do with it. Because I was young. I was early high school. I didn't know what to do with this information. And it's always just sort of sat with me because I don't know if she ever was able to unpack that and do anything with it. So then here I am trying to unpack for me. And then how much do I explain to my children about what happened? Do you tell them everything, you know, so that they have all this information? Or
which is part of the challenge because they're being told something.
Yeah.
And so for years told, well, you know, your mom was a bit rebellious and she was all these things, but never in trauma, in process, never any of those things. So they're being told something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I can say the same thing about my grandmother. You know, my grandmother had her first child at 14. And I remember her telling me when I was little, she didn't know that that's how you had a baby. And I thought it was so weird because I was like, what you mean you didn't know? Like, how you not know? You know, but life is different back then, right? I don't know what she knew and didn't know and didn't talk about anything. But then there was another conversation with someone else in my family who had said, oh, well, you know, your grandma, she was, she was hot to trot or whatever. And she was always out doing stuff. And I was like, no, 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 no. Let's, let's hold back on how we talk about my grandma.
And let's talk about trauma.
Right.
And how that shows up.
Because she was 14. And apparently this man that she got pregnant by was a grown man. Like a grown man, like a married man, I think he was a preacher or something.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we're going to say that my grandma was hot to trot.
Similar situation.
Like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
That's not okay. Like, her whole narrative, she didn't get to own it. I don't know if she ever got to own it. Because then she didn't talk about it.
Yeah. But had to live with the shame and the coloring of that.
Yeah.
The ways in which we color people in.
Yeah.
Or we get colored in.
Because we don't even get to choose the crayon.
Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways, the wrong shades. Like, you picked that for me, and that's not even who I am. That's the wrong color.
Right.
I'm not mad, I'm hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're not seeing me.
Yeah.
And making assumptions. And there's too much assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me think about social media being the
And so the gift
cause.
of doing this work is you get to begin to break some of those generational curses because you find a way to begin to have some of those conversations. And so I'm hoping that not only will my children read it, but others. And folks are beginning to read it. So I've been getting text messages and calls. I'm always astounded. Like, you just gonna leave me out there? You're not gonna you'll text me and call me about how transformative it is, or share your truth, but you just gonna leave me out there as the only one with the story. So I'm like, okay, this is a special club where the members don't want to tell anyone. It's like a secret society, but the kind of society that's still keeping secrets. And so it's an interesting kind of membership. And so I hope, as a part of the journey, that folks will begin to have the safe spaces to find themselves and to heal. And so I'm like, okay.
I know, I think that's beautiful. I want to make sure, because there were two little notes I made with my little sticky notes here that I put on my glasses, because now I need glasses.
Do I need to get my book?
No, you said, chapter 6, what is making peace?
Oh, okay.
And you say, I always thought I was accepting what happens. Yesterday I discovered a new definition. Making peace is about accepting whatever happens. It's not about accepting whatever happens. Rather, it is the acknowledgement that something has happened and a commitment to doing what can be done in its wake.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really profound because, I don't know, a lot of times when people talk about making peace and forgiveness and all of that, like, I struggle with certain things because there's making peace and not holding like anger, but there's also this place of where I'm not actually about to forgive you for what you did, but I gotta let it go and move on. And so I've struggled with like, well, what does that actually look like? Because some people say you gotta forgive the other person. And I don't know what that means when someone's trespassed you in a way that you gotta forgive them. Like, not, and I understand forgive and not forget or whatever doesn't mean you have to let them back into your life, but even sometimes the forgiveness part of like, because I don't know, I just struggle so much with that. But I think about with this making peace, it's like, so what is, you acknowledge that something happened, and now it's like, so what now?
Yes. Which was another lesson that came out of that. And I can tell you some clear examples for me where it was like the other way of thinking about making peace was never going to allow me to have it. So if peace was me forgetting or saying I'm okay, or I guess I'll just live with that, like I probably was never going to be able to make peace in that way with the ways in which I was violated. But now I can absolutely find peace in knowing that it happened and it did not kill me. It did not fully stop me. It made a waylay me for a while. And if there are some things that I get to have and claim, that it may have even tried to stand in the way of me having. Mm-hmm. And so my ability to experience intimacy with my husband, like, mm-hmm. Hey, the persons that violated me in that way don't get to have that anymore. So that's the piece I'm gonna make. Like, I'm the years that I did not hug or kiss my sons on their foreheads or any of those things, because I could not understand how my uncle could violate me in the way that he did. Mm-hmm. And so literally years of robbing my sons of the affirmation of knowing that they were special to me and being able to see, I will make peace with what he did. And in the wake of it, I'm going to hug them now. I'm going to kiss them on their forehead, as grown as they are, and mm-hmm. let them know that they are beautiful or special, or that I love mm-hmm. and adore them. Because I don't have to wonder about where my limit is, because he didn't have any. Mm-hmm. I know where my limit is. Also, this notion of making peace by acknowledging that if you got to where you are, or you've done what you did, that maybe some of the things that you thought you needed or from who you needed mm-hmm. weren't actually those things, or you wouldn't be there. And so I'm like, I thought I needed him to be someone that wasn't a pedophile. And for years, because we did not talk about it, I thought I was the only one in my family. And so I spent a lot of time going, what did I do wrong? Or why would he have done that? Was it something I gave off? Only to finally say something maybe about 5 or 6 years ago and discover that it was like maybe 6 or 7 children from that generation, and one for decades. And so like this notion of even making peace is, he was going to violate whoever. And so I now have peace about the fact that it wasn't necessarily something that I chose for me. Mm-hmm. And so I don't have to keep trying to figure out how did I allow that to happen to me, or what did I do that it happened in that moment. And so that for me, the making peace is about not taking ownership, not necessarily even forgetting, but also doing the work to make sure that I fully recover from it. Like, I will recover having a loving, affectionate relationship with my sons, even though I painfully remember struggling to breastfeed, because I felt violated just even breastfeeding my own children. Mm-hmm. And so to even be robbed of that. Now when I see them, I can give them the side hug, and right. and I'm like, one of these days I'm gonna kiss both of them on their forehead, as old as they are, because I have made peace with the fact that his pedophilia doesn't have to be the boundary for how I affirm or hold my children. He doesn't get to continue to rob me of that. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do that work so that by the time my sons have my grandchildren, mm-hmm. I can hold them lovingly and with a confidence of knowing I was never the things that happened to me. Mm-hmm. I am not. And so it's from that place that I'm making peace in several ways, whether it's I make peace with what happened at the unemployment assistance system during the pandemic.
I feel like that's a whole nother podcast. Yeah. Because I don't know if I made peace for you. Because, child, that's a conversation.
But more peace with that first marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I hate that it feels like we have to struggle to get to this place of peace and this place of wisdom and understanding. It's like, I feel like I could have got all this with, an easier, journey. But at the same time, it's made us who we are.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to know you, and I'm glad to know who you are and how you are.
Right.
Yes, and I appreciate it so much. And I will be in the club of reading and doing the work in this book because I know that it will be helpful because I know that you wrote it from, this place of love and this place of joy and place of searching for, what we need, especially as Black women, as we navigate through, what seems like sometimes treacherous waters and, still making it out the other side and not giving up. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad you came.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for listening.
Acknowledging our shared memberships.
Yeah. Yeah, some of these clubs, they kind of suck, but the company's nice.
But absolutely, they get to have some of the best members, even though it's the worst club.
Amen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you too. All right, and that's Sticky Note Conversations on the Fly. That's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. Hosted and executively produced by Erika Washington. With editing by Black Gypsy LLC and Simone Endres. Special thanks to KUNV 91.5 in Las Vegas. This show is powered by Make It Work Nevada, a project of Tides Advocacy. And a special thank you to Grove GT Teague and Eno Sabad, who made our new theme song, Way Below Acceptable.